It's very easy to offend a person, but it's even easier to break his heart. I was unlucky with women. I thought there was something wrong with me until I met the love of my life. I thought my life was getting better, but I was wrong. Eloise shattered my heart. I realize I should have handled the situation with more finesse and sophistication, but deep down, I'm still just a farm boy, even after all these years. My name's Walter Stillman, an aspiring tax attorney by trade. Not the most exciting profession, right? But at the time, I wasn't even that. Fresh out of law school with an advanced LLM in taxation, the only job I could land was in the bankruptcy department of a mid-sized Manhattan law firm. It was the firm's smallest and least appealing practice area. My living situation mirrored the modesty of my job. Rent in New York City has always been notoriously expensive, and back then, a Manhattan apartment was well beyond the reach of a junior associate. Even the outer boroughs seemed overpriced. After a long search, I ended up renting a room with 2 other struggling souls at the far end of a subway line in Brooklyn. The neighborhood was in decline, and my commute to the office felt endless. In short, my career in the great city had started with little more than a humble job and a roof over my head. However, my fortune seemed to turn from the moment I started working. The head of the bankruptcy department was Eric Erickson, a sharp, silver-haired man in his late 60s. He was one of the most respected figures in the New York bankruptcy scene, the guy you called for tough or unique legal questions. Though he had no tolerance for incompetence, he was an excellent teacher and willing to help. Even now, I remain grateful to Mr. Erickson. He, as city folk might say, did me a solid. He became both my mentor and my friend, teaching me skills that would prove invaluable in the future. I didn't realize it then, but I had found my path, and happiness soon followed, though not before I had my heart broken. Most days, the bankruptcy department consisted of just Mr. Erickson and me. Bankruptcy was the least respected practice at the esteemed firm of Portman and Rosencrantz during those booming times. If we needed assistance, there were 2 part-time associates available, albeit reluctantly. I was essentially receiving a graduate-level education in a branch of law that could have been written by Lewis Carroll. It was a jurisdiction where left was right and right was always wrong, and the laws seemed to belong with Alice on the other side of the looking glass. Chuck Thompson was the only person from my graduating class at Northwestern University School of Law who had ventured this far east. We hadn't been close in law school, but our Midwestern roots naturally pulled us together in the chilly, sprawling metropolis of the East Coast. Chuck worked, more accurately, slaved, at the Manhattan DA's office. He had recently married Carol, a true New Yorker. It seemed natural, I suppose, to be invited to dinner at their Manhattan apartment. What I wasn't prepared for upon my arrival was the presence of an exceptionally attractive, tall woman. Eloise Schaffer embodied New York elegance, which is probably the best way to describe her. She was the epitome of sophistication, with an effortless grace that suggested her stunning appearance was a given rather than the result of painstaking effort. I had no idea why she was seated next to me at this dinner with my friends. This striking, raven-haired, green-eyed beauty seemed completely out of my league. No one would expect her to be interested in an ordinary farm boy with a junior associate job. Yet Carol Thompson, in her matchmaking wisdom, seemed to think otherwise. I enjoyed the evening spent in pleasant company. Eloise Schaffer was not only beautiful, but also beautiful. Sociable and by no means shy, she was a pleasant dinner companion. When she asked me to escort her back to her Brooklyn apartment, I assumed we would take a taxi, but she insisted on taking the subway. She stayed by my side during the trip from Chelsea in Manhattan to Boerum Hill in Brooklyn, which took some time, especially late at night, and included a short walk. She used this time to get to know me better, asking a lot of questions and listening carefully to my answers. It was an exciting experience that gave me confidence in myself. At the door of her apartment, she insisted on kissing me as a reward for accompanying her. This kiss was so passionate that it seemed like it could melt iron, and I certainly liked it. She smiled knowingly, fully aware of the effect she was having on me, and waited patiently for me to figure out what was going on. Can we see each other again?" I asked. After some arguments, we agreed on the time of our official first date. I returned to my squalid apartment at the far end of Flatbush Avenue, hardly believing my luck. 5 weeks into the relationship and after 4 dates, I found myself in a deep pit of despair. The night before, Eloise told me she wouldn't be able to see me over the weekend. The reason? A prior commitment to someone else. After much effort, I finally got her to reveal his name, Rodrigo Ruiz. A quick search revealed he was the state labor commissioner, a tall, handsome, older man, the type of man you'd expect Eloise to be with. Apparently, I wasn't hiding my despair well because Mr. Erickson called me into his office. "All right, Walt, what's wiped that usual Midwestern grin off your face and left you so gloomy?" Eric inquired. "Sorry, it's personal. I didn't want to bother anyone with my problems." There was no point in hiding anything from Eric, and soon enough, he had the whole story. He leaned back in his chair, brought his hands together, as if in prayer, and rested his chin on his fingertips. "When I was a kid," he began, "this city was still run by the Irish and Jews. They were fascinating to watch. 3rd or even 4th generation Americans who still spoke with an Irish brogue or threw in a Yiddish phrase. These were folks who graduated from Fordham and Columbia but mastered the art of being professionally ethnic. Now they're gone. I sometimes miss the flair they brought to politics. Nowadays, the politicians are professionally black or Hispanic. They don't seem to have the same charm, at least to me, and they tend to take themselves far too seriously. I'm sorry, Mr. Erickson, but I'm not sure I follow." He sighed. "My greatest hope for you is that you never lose that Midwestern innocence you've got. Walter, your girl's guy was originally named Rodney Kaufman. His father was an heir to the Kaufman department store fortune, and his mother, Luisa Ruiz, was a Puerto Rican Jew. Rodney is married to Sophie Sloan from one of the wealthier Sloan families. For political reasons, he's taken his mother's last name and adopted a Spanish version of his first name. Roddy is a full-time politician and self-identified Hispanic. From what it sounds like, your lady will choose you over him for 3 key reasons. First, the man is 47 and she's much younger. Second, he's married to a respectable Jewish woman with whom he has 3 children. She's not the jealous type and allows him his affairs, but she'd definitely object to being replaced, as would her influential family. Third, Roddy and his family. Even though these are progressive times, I doubt he wants to risk offending his wealthy, politically supportive family by getting involved with a Christian girl." "But what if she's already seeing him?" I asked. Eric gave me the irritated look he reserves for obvious questions. "How old is this woman?" he asked. 29. A woman at 29 with her biological clock ticking, and you, a 26-year-old eligible lawyer. I think you're undervaluing your position here. Roddy's involvement is just a way to push you to act. 4 dates with a single, 29-year-old woman these days means it's serious. So either get serious or walk away." Eric Erickson concluded. After talking to my boss, I felt not only better but also more confident. On our next date, I pushed the conversation further and was met with an enthusiastic response. "If we're going to take this any further, I need to know you're serious," she said. "I could say the same," I replied. "Are you speaking in general?" "Yes, and about Roddy." I've been seeing him for a few years, she admitted. But he's not serious, and I am, I said, once again reminded of how sharp Erickson's advice had been. That night she took me to bed. While I wasn't completely inexperienced, I was far from seasoned. She, on the other hand, was much more experienced and made full use of it. I barely made it through the night. A week later, I moved into her apartment. By New York standards, it was quite large, with a hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly. A proposal was inevitable, as she started dropping hints as soon as I settled in. Eloise was 29 when we met, a junior executive at Sanderson Financial Management. She was already on the verge of moving up to a senior position and, shortly after our engagement, she became a VP. I knew she was smart and a bit of a perfectionist, but her organizational skills left me nearly speechless. She planned the wedding in just 6 weeks. In terms of family, she was the eldest of 3 and the only daughter. Her father, also a lawyer, was busy developing real estate in Westchester and Putnam counties, north of New York City. From what I could gather, he was deeply involved in politics. That explained how they managed to plan such a large and impressive wedding so quickly. As for my own family, I only had one sister left. Nancy lived on the West Coast near Portland with her girlfriend. She stopped talking to me the day she told me she was a lesbian. Maybe I didn't react with enough enthusiasm, but a rift formed that never healed. I invited her to the wedding, but she chose not to attend. My career had settled into a steady routine. I was now handling the smaller cases on my own without Eric's help. It was clear that he was preparing me for more responsibility. The bankruptcy field was experiencing a lull, and Eric made it clear that I should be ready when things picked up, because he was planning to retire soon. You've got what it takes, the right mix of intelligence and a likable personality. But you need to learn the tricks of the trade, he'd often say. I've been studying the statutes and cases thoroughly. Yeah, but there are some tricks they don't put in the books. I learned a new trick the Friday before my wedding. Eloise and her mother had chosen Labor Day for the ceremony. There was something about the early date that puzzled me, but it also meant we had the weekend to prepare and could fly off for the Caribbean honeymoon. Her parents were gifting us the Tuesday after. The bags were packed and lined up against the hallway wall in our apartment, 3 for Eloise, 1 for me. I was a bit nervous about the wedding, but I had no time to dwell on it that morning. The week before, my fiancée had gone to her family home in Westchester so we could have some space apart before the wedding. It'll make the honeymoon even sweeter, and it'll keep my pre-wedding jitters from scaring my husband-to-be away, she'd said with a laugh. At 10 o'clock on Friday, the last working day of August, 3 days before my wedding, I had a hearing in bankruptcy court for a first-day order. This type of order is issued early in a reorganization to set the rules for the debtor's continued operation under court protection. In a small case like mine, these hearings aren't very formal, usually just a few attorneys and the judge. It's mainly the bank's lawyer and a debtor attorney like me. Judge Marks was known for being a stickler for the rules. That Friday, I walked into my office ready to grab the file and head to court, only to have the secretary inform me that the judge's secretary had called to arrange a telephone hearing as soon as I arrived. I instantly felt nervous. The judge's clerk connected all the parties, and Judge Marks said, "All right, Amanda, what's your issue with this order?" Amanda Moskowitz, representing the bank, was a sharp attorney who knew the law well. Her argument was precise, targeting the weakest aspects of my request. Though she was an outstanding lawyer, her appearance didn't quite match her skills. Her nickname, Sugar, didn't seem to fit. She was short, under 5 feet, and a bit heavyset, particularly in her lower half, but I always thought she had a cute face. When Amanda finished her argument, I tried to speak, but the judge interrupted. "Order granted. My clerk will fax it to everyone," he said before the call ended abruptly. As I wondered what had just happened, Amanda laughed. "Judge Marks got tickets from my firm yesterday. for the final days of the Saratoga races. He needs to be up in Albany by 1 o'clock and can't waste time on this call. He ruled against me today for appearances in a case that doesn't really matter. But next time, I'll destroy you, she said, still chuckling. Not the way I like to win, I complained. Take what you can get, she replied, pausing for a moment. You know, my aunts would say you're a very fine young man for a Goyish. She ended the call with a laugh. Right around then, Eric came in and told me to take the day off and relax before the wedding. As I was leaving, I couldn't resist asking, "What's a Goyish?" He smiled. "It means you and me, a non-Jew. Why?" Someone said I was a fine young man for a Goyish. Oh, that's a compliment. Somebody likes you. I was on my way to the apartment, thinking I might get a head start on my trip to Westchester. I wasn't expected until the next day, with the wedding rehearsal set for Saturday night. But why waste time in the city? I had anticipated being tied up with my case for most of the day, possibly even into the evening. We were supposed to be fine-tuning every word of the order to satisfy everyone involved, but that didn't happen. So I figured, why not get moving early? I tried calling first, but Eloise's phone went straight to voicemail. So I made a crucial decision. I called her parents' house in Westchester, hoping to either speak with someone or leave a message. It was one of those random events that changes everything. None of the Schaffer family members were home. The usual maid, Rosita, had the day off to get fitted for her dress for the wedding and had her cousin fill in. The cousin was a woman with limited English whom I'd never spoken to before. She didn't recognize my name. I want to leave a message for Miss Eloise. This is Walter, I repeated for the third time. She not here, in city. I know she lives in the city, but she's home for the wedding. This is Walter, and I'll be there later today. She in city. Stay hotel. Be here tomorrow for wedding, Rosita's cousin replied. It took me a moment, but my curiosity was piqued. What hotel? Plaza, she answered. I'm not usually a suspicious person, but who wouldn't be after a conversation like that? It was almost noon when I gave in and called the Plaza Hotel. Our reception was in Westchester County, not at the famous Plaza Hotel in New York. Something was going on that I hadn't been told about. There had been a bachelorette party the previous week, but maybe the ladies decided to have another pre-wedding celebration. I called the hotel and inquired about Eloise Schaffer, but there was no one registered under that name. Perhaps out of insecurity, I then asked, "How about Rodrigo Ruiz?" "No, I'm sorry," replied the young woman. "Could you check for Rodney Kaufman?" After a brief pause, she said, "Yes, we have a Mr. and Mrs. Rodney Kaufman in the bridal suite. Please connect me." It still might not be them, I told myself as the phone rang. When a man answered, I nearly hung up, but I had to ask. "Could I speak to Eloise Schaffer, please?" I asked. "Elle, it's for you," I heard him say. "Hello?" she answered. I recognized her voice, but I was speechless. "Hello? Is anyone there?" "There's no one there," she told him. "There was. He asked for you." "Hello? It's Walter. Don't bother going to the wedding, I won't be there," I finally managed to say. As I hung up, I heard her call my name just before the line went dead. The next period of time is a blur. I was in shock, sitting in the apartment as if paralyzed. In a way, I was paralyzed. It felt like all the strength had drained from my body. Everything good in my life seemed to have disappeared. It had all been a lie. The romance, the time we spent living together, and the stylish apartment. It was our apartment, but technically hers, as the lease was in her name. My mind was in a kind of lockdown. I knew I needed to get up, grab my bag from the hallway, and leave. I had no place to go, but I needed to get out of there. Someone opened the apartment door. It was her. I wondered, somewhat dazed, how she had arrived so quickly. I glanced at the clock, 2 p.m. It dawned on me that the judge would be at the races, a fact that had drastically altered my life. "Walter, we need to talk," she said. "Have you been there all week?" I asked. She stood in the middle of the living room, avoiding my gaze. "It was just us saying our goodbyes," she explained. "So it never really ended, did it?" I accused. "Walter, stop it. You know I love you." "How would I know that?" "I'll never see him again. It's over," she said. "Why?" "I've been with him for 7 years, since almost the day I moved to the city." "No? Why end it?" "Because I'm marrying you on Monday," she said. "No, you're not." "Walter, please be reasonable. Everything's set. Over 300 guests are coming." I stayed silent. It was pointless to argue. I got up and walked past her. "Where are you going? We need to resolve this," she called after me. I grabbed my bag and walked out. She followed, shouting for me to stop, but eventually gave up. I wandered aimlessly for a while, vaguely heading toward the bridge. As night fell, tired of wandering, I crossed Court Street, near the Borough Hall, and found a small bar. Despite the Friday night crowd, I found a dark corner to disappear into. "Hello," she said. I looked up to see Sugar Moskowitz, a drink in each hand. She placed one in front of me. "I thought you could use this," she said. Thanks," I stammered, taking a sip of the strong drink. "It's a stinger, and as you can see, I'm not exactly the religious type," she added. "Religious?" She smiled a charming smile and explained. "Having a drink at a singles bar with a non-Jew on Friday night. What could I tell my mother about this suitcase?" As she spoke, I looked down, suddenly remembering my own suitcase. "Oh, Well, I had to leave. After all, this is her apartment," I said, taking a sip of the drink that burned me. Sugar, or Amanda, didn't really ask a lot of questions. Instead, she shared funny stories about herself and people we both knew from our work in bankruptcy court. It's a small area, and everyone knows each other. She kept pouring more into my glass and trying to make me laugh. I guess she already knew that I was engaged and was getting married soon, but she didn't seem surprised to find me in a Brooklyn bar with a suitcase on the Friday before my wedding. Perhaps she drank before I arrived and did not realize the significance of the suitcase and my current situation. The only thing I really remember from that night is how Amanda helped me into the car and said, "It's a short trip." Later, I had a dream about Eloise. She pinned me to the bed and we were close. I had to pee. It was urgent, but as I got out of bed, I realized I had no idea where I was. The apartment looked different. For a moment, I was completely disoriented. Then it hit me, sharp and painful. I had walked out on Eloise and her apartment. So where was I now? My head throbbed, feeling like it was stuffed with cotton. I could barely recall anything from the night before. I remembered going into a small bar on Court Street. Someone I knew appeared. For a moment, I couldn't remember who it was. And then I did. Amanda Sugar Moskowitz. What was she doing there, and why was I here, in someone else's bed? I was in a small room, just big enough to fit the double bed. There was no other furniture. The bed was pushed right up against a window that stretched from the middle of the wall to the ceiling. I was alone in the bed, but it was clear someone else had slept there too. There was no closet, and my clothes were nowhere to be seen. The room itself could have been a large closet, converted into a bedroom. There was a door, but it didn't open fully, blocked by the bed. I peeked out and saw a larger room. On one side, a window jutted out from the wall, allowing a view of the sidewalk outside. I realized I was in what they call an English basement, a level below the main building, half above and half below ground. The windows started just below the sidewalk level. The space had been converted into a small apartment, or, as I later learned, 2 apartments, the one I was in and an even smaller one in the back. The main room was split by a counter into a dining area and a kitchen. The bay window created a cozy nook with 2 small chairs and a window seat, functioning as a mini living room. Not seeing anyone around, I quietly snuck out, searching for a bathroom and my clothes. I spotted a door on the far side of the room. As I reached it, the door opened and out walked Amanda Moskowitz, wearing a bathrobe and toweling her wet hair. "Oh, you're awake," she said, noticing me. "About time. It's probably almost noon." Instinctively, I covered myself, which only made her giggle. "A bit late for modesty, don't you think?" she said. "I saw everything last night." All I could do was rush past her, assuming the room she emerged from with damp hair was the bathroom. I was correct, and after closing the door, I lifted the toilet seat and relieved my bladder. The bathroom was small, with just a shower stall and no tub. I decided to take advantage of it and freshen up before confronting my host about my missing clothes and suitcase. The shower was tiny, but the hot water felt wonderful on my very hungover body. Feeling somewhat revived, I looked around for a towel, but there was none. Wet and without outerwear, I had no choice but to go out and face Amanda. I opened the bathroom door and stepped out, only to realize we weren't alone anymore. A young, dark-haired woman was sitting at the table, grinning at me. Amanda was in the small, open-plan kitchen, busy with cups and a coffee pot. "How do you take your coffee?" Amanda asked, so casually, as if I was standing there in my clothes. I quickly ducked back behind the bathroom door and called out, "Could I please get my clothes, or at least a towel?" The 2 women were laughing, but Amanda paused long enough to say, "The towels are in the closet, along with your bag and the clothes you left behind last night." Peeking out from behind the door, I asked, "And where exactly is the closet?" Still giggling, Amanda pointed with the coffee pot towards a set of louvered doors on the far side of the room, just before what seemed to be the apartment entrance. "I'd get them for you, but as you can see, I'm busy," Amanda said. The other woman didn't make a move to help, so there was nothing left to do but make a dash for the closet. I hurried over, threw open the doors, and found my clothes right there. My suit and shirt were hung neatly, and my underwear was folded on top of my suitcase. I quickly grabbed my shorts and shirt, dressing as fast as possible while the women continued giggling behind me. "Walter, this is my sister, by the way, Sonia Rabinowitz," Amanda introduced. "Hello, Mr. Stillman," Sonia greeted me. "Hello," I replied while I dug through my suitcase for a pair of jeans. "Don't feel like you need to dress up for me," Sonia said. "I'm the younger sister, but I'm already married with 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. Male bodies don't faze me." They both laughed as I pulled on my jeans. "Come have some coffee," Amanda invited. Sonia brought Bialis. "I'll be just a minute," I responded. "You didn't tell me he was so shy," Sonia stage whispered to her sister. "Didn't really know," Amanda whispered back loudly. "We're still kinda new." "You're a wild one, Amanda Moskowitz," Sonia chuckled. Fully dressed, I turned and took a seat at the small table. I needed that coffee. "I take my coffee black, no sugar," I said. Sonia giggled and whispered to her sister, "Looks like he got his sugar last night." They both burst out laughing. It made my head ache. Amanda handed me a cup of very strong coffee. Just as I set it down, a cell phone rang. It was Sonia's, and she fished it out of a large leather purse by her feet. "Oh, hi," Sonia answered. She covered the phone and whispered, "Aunt Hester." Of course I remembered, Sonia continued. "I'm at Amanda's right now to remind her, but she has company, and I haven't had a chance to bring it up." There was a pause, then Sonia added with a smirk, "No, her company is male." Amanda made a slicing motion across her throat, signaling Sonia to stop, but Sonia continued undeterred. "Yeah, he's kind of cute but a bit shy. No, definitely not Jewish. Yes, I'm absolutely certain. Sonia lowered her voice, whispering into the phone. I caught a glimpse when he got out of the shower. Now, Sonia was laughing uncontrollably. She wants to talk to you, Sonia said, passing the phone to Amanda. Hi, Auntie, Amanda greeted into Sonia's phone. No, I'd never forget Dad's birthday. 6 tomorrow night and dinner at 7. Got it. Oh, he's just a friend. Really? There was a pause as Hester seemed to be talking. That won't work. He's a work friend. He'd probably feel awkward at a family gathering. Amanda handed the phone back to her sister. Sonia listened as her aunt spoke. I'm not sure, Sonia said. Then turning to me, added, She wants to know your name. What should I tell her? Walter, I answered. Walter Stillman. It's Walter, and I'm pretty sure they slept together last night. Sonia, Amanda exclaimed. Now Aunt Sophie is on the line saying they want to meet him. No, oh no, absolutely not, Amanda shouted. Then Sonia handed me the phone, saying, My Aunt Sophie wants to talk to you. I took the phone and held it to my ear. Hello, Walter. I'm Amanda's Aunt Sophie, and my sister Hester and I are hosting a birthday party for our brother Leonard, Amanda, and Sonia's father. We would love for you to come with our Mandy. Will you? It would mean so much to the family. I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to impose. Mr. Moskowitz might not appreciate me at his party, I said, trying to find a polite way to decline. I'll leave it up to Amanda. Then I handed the phone to Amanda. She spent a good 10 minutes arguing with her aunts, while a mischievous Sonia watched with a smirk. The aunts on the other end of the line each took turns arguing with their niece until Amanda finally gave in. Okay, I'll bring him, she said, then hung up the phone and muttered, Sugar, sugar, sugar. You know she does that, Sonia said. What do you mean? I asked. She replaces fuck with sugar, as if we don't know what she really means. With one last laugh, Sonia stood up and said, Well, it looks like my job here is done. Time to go relieve my husband before the kids drive him crazy. Left alone, Amanda turned to me and said, You don't have to come if you don't want to. My family can be a bit overwhelming. I just don't understand why your aunts want an outsider at a family gathering. Amanda gave a short, almost sad laugh and said, Sonia is my younger sister by nearly 4 years. I turned 30 on my last birthday and she already has 3 kids. My aunts, and the rest of my family, think I should be married and pregnant by now. It sounds like your biological clock is on their minds, but they still don't know me, and apparently, I'm of the wrong religion. But you're the right gender, she said, then paused before continuing. You see, I used to have a roommate here to help with the $3,500 monthly rent. As you can imagine, junior bankruptcy associates don't make that much. I nodded, aware of the modest salaries typical of our branch of law, but then it struck me that there was only one bed in the room. Was your roommate a woman? Yes, but don't jump to conclusions, Sugar said. I'm not saying that I'm completely heterosexual, but I need to be properly drunk to be interested in women. Jessie, my former roommate, turned it down. She wanted a relationship that I couldn't offer, so now I'm almost a heterosexual Jewish spinster. I thought about her words as I chewed on a Bailey cookie that looked like a bagel. Finally, I asked the question that was on my mind. Last night, Amanda laughed and said, Yes, we did, although I didn't particularly like being called Eloise. I'm sorry, I said, feeling my cheeks flush. Hey, don't be such a prude. We were both a little drunk, she said. Actually, you were very drunk. I took a long sip of coffee, trying to realize what a strange turn my life had taken. Just the morning before, I was conducting a case against the woman who is now sitting across from me in a bathrobe, Amanda Moskowitz, who is affectionately called Sugar. I was excited about getting married to Eloise, and so, just a day later, I lost Eloise and discussed yesterday's meeting with Miss Moskowitz. It's overwhelming, I said. What? This, I said. Eloise, and the fact that I'm here with you. She wasn't laughing, but it must have been hard for her to keep a straight face. Look, you've had a hard time with Eloise and all that. Why don't you just rest here today? I thought for a moment. I don't think I could handle being alone right now. If you don't mind, I'll stay. She smiled and said, Great. Let's go to bed. That's exactly what we did. We climbed back into bed. Intimacy with Amanda was different from intimacy with Eloise. I was lying next to her, a little lower on the bed. In one swift movement, she was on top of me. She looked into my eyes and said, From my point of view, nothing compares to a man in intimacy. But in a relationship, I need more than just intimacy. I need someone I can communicate with, and besides, I need someone I can respect as a person. How do I fit this definition? I asked. You are a very worthy lover. Obviously, your fiancé has put a lot of effort into honing your skills, she replied. I didn't have anything to say to that. I was outraged by the subtext, although Eloise did tell me a lot about my abilities in bed. Nevertheless, Amanda continued, you're here in my bed because you're a good person. I've been watching you. You never hurt anyone if you can avoid it. You are honest and treat women as people, not as objects. In short, you're one of the good guys. A rare breed these days. I said. All this is fine, but is this how you should describe a novice lawyer? And it looks like you've been keeping an eye on me. Of course I've been watching you, Amanda said. I saw you on Court Street and followed you to the bar, didn't I? If Miss Eloise Schaffer loses track of her wonderful fiancé, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I'm not a trophy, I insisted. You're not saying she was in love with you, are you? Amanda asked. No, I suppose not, I replied, feeling the gravity of the situation. I'm sorry, said Amanda. I didn't mean to hurt you. With these words, we continued to do business. In the end, we decided to order a takeaway for dinner and, after eating, fell asleep. The next morning, Amanda got a call from her aunts, reminding her about the party and asking if she could come early to help with the preparations. Now, Mandy, don't forget to take Walter with you. Sonia has told us so much about him, and we all can't wait to meet him, Aunt Esther said. I do not know what Sonia told you, but he is not my boyfriend. Well, bring him anyway. He knows he's invited. If he comes, he will come, Amanda replied and hung up the phone. I think they're waiting for me, I said with a chuckle. You don't have to come, she told me. What else do I need to do? I didn't want to be alone yet. Amanda had distracted me from the mess in my personal life, and I didn't want to dwell on what Eloise had done. Okay, she said, but keep in mind that you will be under close attention and you will be treated as a potential suitor. Well, in a way, I'm the groom. But if you don't mind, let's keep my personal problem to ourselves, I said. It sounds tempting. That girl of easy virtue, Eloise, has disappeared from the scene, at least for today, because sooner or later you will have to meet her face to face, and the sooner the better. I know, I said with a light sigh. Amanda reached across the table, covering my hands with hers, and said, Walter, you need to either go through with the marriage or end it by tomorrow. Either way, you're going to face a major problem. I can't go through with it, not now. Don't be so quick to decide. Backing out now will have serious repercussions for your career and your life. There will be a massive scandal. Why? I don't plan to make the reasons public, and I'm sure she won't either. Oh, my poor naive one, she said, squeezing my hands tightly. Do you really believe no one knew about Commissioner Ruiz and Eloise Schaffer? They've been involved for quite some time. I thought they ended things. Amanda didn't laugh, but her crooked smile said it all. I'd been deceived. Eloise had been seeing Ruish the whole time we were together. But why? I asked. If she wanted to stay his mistress, why involve me? He plans to run for governor next year, she explained. Your marriage to Eloise seemed to end the affair, and you were a desirable match. Young, decent, professional, and heterosexual, the kind of man every cis woman in New York is looking for. Cis woman? A person who identifies with their birth gender. In this case, a woman like Eloise Schaffer, a young woman in need of a partner to quiet the rumors about her affair with an older married politician. She played me for a fool, as you New Yorkers might say. Oh, don't start feeling sorry for yourself. She might have been just saying goodbye as she claimed. The week before our wedding? Would you have preferred she did it the week after? I'd rather she never did it at all. In fact, I insist on it. Well, you got back at her through me. You can still go to Westchester and marry her. That's not happening. Hey, get a grip before you do something rash. If you don't show up at the church tomorrow, people will ask why. Let them. All right, let's pause here. A scandal benefits no one. You're a junior associate in the bankruptcy department. Commissioner Ruiz, on the other hand, is a very big deal. If you make waves, his boat may rock, but yours will sink. You're saying I'll lose my job? So what? I'm saying you'll lose your career. No one will hire you. I paused at that, but only briefly. Amanda, I said, I may be just a simple guy from Iowa, but when Eloise accepted my proposal, she made a commitment to me. She didn't keep her commitment, and I won't be forced into keeping mine. Amanda shook her head. Finally, she said, Come on, you stubborn corn. Husker, get dressed. I'm taking you to meet my family. It's not every day they get to meet a real, live Presbyterian. My family's Lutheran, actually. Same difference? She winked. At 5 o'clock that evening, we took a yellow cab to the Moskowitz home on Beverly Road. Using a car service was not allowed. Uncle Morty had been a taxi driver before he retired. Now, Morty lived on his Social Security with his two sisters, Hester and Sophie, in the house they inherited from their parents. Morty had once been married, but his wife had left him 30 years ago for a shoe salesman, a topic that was, apparently, never discussed. Aunt Sophie's husband was killed in Vietnam, and Hester never married. Only Amanda's father, Leonard, the youngest sibling, had children. Leonard and his wife, Rebecca, had 2 daughters, Amanda and Sonia, and now 3 grandchildren, thanks to Sonia and her husband, Gerald, Jerry, Rabinowitz. The Moskowitz family house was located in an area of Flatbush, Brooklyn, known by realtors as Ditmas or Ditmas Park. As we approached the oversized 2-story house on a larger lot than usual for city living, I couldn't spot any park. Unlike Amanda's apartment, which was across from a small park in a quiet neighborhood, her aunts and uncle lived off what seemed to be a busy avenue. The house was styled in a faux Queen Anne manner, not quite a mansion but larger than what you'd typically expect for a single-family home in New York City. Aunt Hester, a short and stout woman with steel-gray hair, greeted us at the door. She first embraced Amanda, calling her Mandy, before turning her attention to me. After giving me a thorough once-over, she declared, "Not bad at all. Quite a handsome young man." "Oh, I think he's rather good-looking," added Aunt Sophie, who emerged from deeper within the house. Sophie was tall with dark hair, and the 2 sisters seemed quite different from one another. Sophie hugged Amanda next, and the 2 aunts then guided us into the kitchen where they were preparing the evening meal. A large cake was on the counter, and the kitchen was filled with the aroma of roast from the oven and the sweet scent of vanilla. "Could you peel some potatoes for us, Mandy?" Sophie asked, handing her a peeler and a colander of freshly washed potatoes. "I'll take your gentleman to help set the table," Hester said, taking me by the arm and leading me through a swinging door into a dining room with wainscoting. The room was long and wide, with a rich burgundy carpet covering the hardwood floor. Dark oak paneling reached halfway up the walls, which were adorned with intricate rose-embossed wallpaper. The ceiling featured an elaborate lattice of mahogany and oak, and a modest chandelier hung from an ornate medallion of carved mahogany flowers. Hester directed me to a set of china cabinets along one wall. The cabinets occupied most of the short side of the room, filled with multiple sets of porcelain plates. She showed me the far cabinet and said, "We'll use these plates today." As she spoke, she smiled and remarked, "It's not easy being Jewish. You need all these dishes." At that point, I only had a vague understanding of the need for separate sets for meat and dairy. Hester handed me a stack of plates, and we began setting the large, claw-footed table, which was covered with a pristine white linen tablecloth. I couldn't resist examining the backs of the plates and the tags on the linen. The china was from England, and the linen from Ireland. It seemed like the real thing, I thought, much like the people, authentic. As Hester set the table and I carried the dinnerware, she seemed to conduct a somewhat aimless interrogation of me. I figured this was the reason she had separated me from her niece. Soon enough, she had gathered all my personal history, except for the details of my failed marriage. When we placed the last fork beside the final plate, she remarked nonchalantly, "It's not painful, you know, just a little snip. Most babies don't even cry." I didn't quite understand what she meant. Before I could ask for clarification, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. A commanding female voice announced, "I'm here, and I brought the birthday boy." Rebecca Moskowitz, also known as Judge Levine of the U.S. District Court, entered the room. It turned out she was Amanda Moskowitz's mother. Her father, Leonard Moskowitz, was a professor of economics at New York University. It was Leonard's birthday I had been invited to. Hester pushed me into the kitchen as she went to greet her brother and sister-in-law. Amanda had peeled some potatoes and left them on the stove when I entered the kitchen. She turned to me and said, "We should wait here while my aunts break the news that you're here as their guest." "Am I going to be a problem?" I asked, suddenly feeling protective. "No, but it might be a bit of a surprise. I've never brought a man home before. Mom can be a bit critical, so just be prepared." It was an awkward situation, which only grew more uncomfortable when we were called into the living room for introductions. The room was spacious and comfortably furnished in early 20th century style, a place meant for relaxation, but I could sense the tension. As we arrived that day, Amanda had taken a small box from the light jacket she had hung up in the hall. The box was clearly wrapped as a birthday present. An awkward silence settled over us as we entered the living room, which was broken by Sugar's father with a smile and a joke. "Is this young man my birthday present, Mandy?" he asked. "No, Papa," Sugar replied quietly. "I brought you this." She led us over to give her father the gift she had brought. She never released my hand, and I realized she had been holding it tightly for some time. "Well," her father said, "I was hoping for a son-in-law, but I'm sure I'll like this." He smiled at his daughter as he said this. As he opened the package, he pulled out a clearly used baseball. His smile grew wider as the others looked on in confusion. Leonard said, "Thank you," then held up the ball. "It's a game ball signed by the Mets," he exclaimed, then stood to hug his daughter. I heard him whisper in Sugar's ear, "I'd still prefer a son-in-law." Sugar whispered something back, but I couldn't hear it. Her father chuckled, but as I glanced over, I saw her mother giving me a stern look. At that moment, Sonia arrived with her husband and 3 children. The kids rushed into the living room, eager to grab the spotlight. "Oh, good, you made it," Sonia said to me, giving me a quick hug. introducing me to her husband, Jerry, a tall, thin man who looked like he might be blown over by a strong gust of wind. Sonia remarked, "This is Sugar's new love. At least she got the gender right this time." Jerry shook my hand and said, "Don't mind Sonia. She just likes to tease her older sister." The conversation in the living room quickly turned to the children's recent adventures and the presents they had brought for their grandfather. It was a relief to be off the center stage, but I could still feel Amanda's mother's eyes on me. Dinner was simple but delicious. The conversation around the table was filled with the joy these people took in being together. Occasionally, a question would come my way. If it was something Amanda could answer, she jumped in immediately. For the more personal questions, I answered briefly or deflected. "Yes, my parents are deceased." "A farm in Iowa?" "I have one sister." I deflected questions about my sister, partly because I wasn't sure how to respond. However, the real scrutiny began during coffee and birthday cake. Judge Levine had been observing, and while the children were busy with the cake, she made her move. "Tell me, Walter, are you related to the Stillman who is marrying Eloise Schaffer tomorrow?" I hesitated before answering, but I spoke up before Amanda, who was sitting across from me, could make the sharp retort I anticipated. "Yes and no," I said. "I was supposed to marry Eloise, but that plan fell through. And before you ask, your daughter had nothing to do with the cancellation." "Really?" Amanda's mother asked, turning to her daughter. "Yes, really, if you care to know," Amanda replied, her hostility evident. "Honestly, I didn't want to bring Walter here, but he was invited and was kind enough to attend." I could see that Amanda's mother was about to say more, but Leonard Moskowitz interrupted, silencing his wife. "Rebecca, be quiet," he said. Before his wife could respond, he added, "It's clear the young man has learned about Mr. Kaufman. I've been observing Walter all evening, and he doesn't seem like the type to tolerate such behavior." It was as if he had thrown a bucket of cold water in his wife's face. The judge was suddenly at a loss for words. Looking around the table, it was evident that while Amanda's parents were aware of the situation, the other guests were not. Amanda took charge. "I've known Walter for a while and admired him from a distance. When I found him recently, lost and alone, I saw a chance to get to know him better. He had been hurt by a truly cruel woman, and yes, Mother, I love him. He's too good a man not to fall in love with." As Amanda spoke, she came around the table and hugged me from behind. "Well, good for my niece," Uncle Morty said, closing the discussion about Amanda and me. I don't remember much of what happened afterward, except that there was a general sense of satisfaction around the table. As we left in a yellow cab, I turned to Amanda and asked, "Did you mean it?" "What?" she replied, trying to evade the question. I wasn't going to let it go and pressed, "When you said you loved me, did you mean it?" The taxi fell silent for a moment before she slowly looked up and said, "Yes, I love you. When I first saw you months ago, I was drawn to you, but it's more than just attraction now. I love you, Walter Stillman." 30 minutes later, I was arrested. Eloise had apparently stayed in our apartment all Friday night, waiting for me to return. Where else could I have gone? However, when I hadn't come back by the next morning, she grew desperate. The wedding was scheduled for Monday, and she suddenly feared I might not show up. In a panic, she contacted the one person who had more to lose than she did. Rodrigo Ruiz, also known as Rodney Kaufman, immediately set the police on a search for me. It took them a day of questioning every bartender on Court Street to discover that I had left a bar called the Shady Lady with a short, brunette woman. Since Amanda and I had taken a cab the 12 blocks to her apartment in Cobble Hill, the police began questioning all the taxi drivers working in the area that night. It wasn't until late Sunday that they figured out we had been dropped off at the corner of Clinton and Congress. They soon learned the basement apartment belonged to Amanda Moskowitz, a woman matching the description of my Friday night companion. The police only found a dark, empty apartment, but undeterred, they stationed 2 patrol cars to wait for the occupant's return. It was an impatient group of officers that greeted Amanda and me when we arrived. Despite Amanda's protests, they quickly took me away. By midnight, I found myself in a small room, badly in need of cleaning and fresh paint. I was seated, handcuffed to a table, with no explanation of the charges against me. The door opened, and Eloise walked in. She looked as stunning as ever. "Are you behind this?" I demanded. My tone was sharp, and the anger and frustration in my voice were unmistakable. She looked a bit startled as she stood on the opposite side of the table. There were 2 chairs beside her, but she didn't attempt to sit down. "Walter, please try to understand. When you didn't come home, I was worried something had happened to you." "So, you had me arrested. For what reason?" "You're not under arrest, but in protective custody, pending a possible mental health commitment," said a tall, strikingly handsome man. He was even more impressive than his photos. He had entered quietly and, as he spoke, moved to stand next to Eloise. He was more than 20 years my senior, and despite his best efforts, the signs of middle age were evident. It was clear he worked hard to fight the passage of time. "Rodney Kaufman, I assume," I said, pouring as much venom as I could into my words. "Rodrigo Ruiz, actually. But Walt, you may call me Rod, as I hope we can be friends. It's Mr. Stillman to you, and I have no intention of being your friend. That's unfortunate, because I believe you're in a tough spot and could use my friendship." I raised my hands slightly, making the chains clink against the table. "You might be able to keep me here, but not for long," I said, more confidently than I felt. "Hopefully long enough for you to hear Eloise out." She had been silent until now, but finally she spoke. "Walter, you're mistaken. Rod and I are just friends. Whatever relationship we had is in the past. If you had stayed long enough on Friday, I would have explained everything. We have a saying in Iowa, 'I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night.' I caught you in his hotel room," I shot back. "Regardless, the 2 of you are scheduled to marry later today, and it's in everyone's best interest that you go through with it." "I'm sorry, but I refuse to marry this girl of easy virtue," I said. Eloise let out a small cry of pain, but Rod just smiled and said, "Let's mind our language, please. No need to lose our temper. Would you rather I call her a prostitute? Because that's exactly what she is. A rich man's prostitute." I could see I had slightly rattled Rodney, but he kept smiling. Eloise turned away, crying. "That attitude will lead to serious trouble. You're being very foolish. Eloise is a beautiful woman who would make a fine wife. If you don't marry her, there will be a scandal. Reporters are expected at this wedding. It's a society event. Her reputation will be ruined, and so will mine, because the truth will get out. People love to gossip, and this would be perfect fodder. I'm told you have a promising career at a top firm. If you don't marry Miss Schaffer today, your career will vanish, and you won't find employment anywhere else," he warned. Now it was my turn to smile. I wouldn't marry this woman even for a senior partnership, let alone to stay a junior associate in the bankruptcy department. "I told you he would be unreasonable," Eloise said, still crying with her back to me. Rod sighed and said, "All right, Mr. Stillman. How much will it cost for you to make Eloise Mrs. Stillman? Trust me, you don't have enough money. It doesn't need to be forever, just a year or 2, then a discreet divorce. And what will people think when that happens?" I shot back. He didn't blink, and something told me he had more than one plan in motion. "I'll handle the situation when the time comes. Name your price for a 2-year marriage." "How pregnant is she?" I asked, finally putting it together. Eloise turned towards me. "It could be yours," she hissed. "Yeah," I replied, "but I'll wait for the DNA test." Rodney's only response was, "How much?" "No way in hell," I almost spat. Further conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a short, bald man in his 60s, followed by two uniformed officers. As he entered, he said, "Hello, Rod, Ms. Schaffer, and you must be Walter Stillman," placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm your attorney, Cy Lebowitz. And this," he continued, handing a document to Rodney, "is a copy of the writ of habeas corpus I just filed at the front desk." "You're up late, aren't you, Cy?" Rod remarked. "Well, you know how it is. Business has been a little slow. Ms. Schaffer is acting in her fiancé's best interest. You're leaving us no choice but to pursue an involuntary commitment," Rodney threatened. "Not sure how that's possible, considering the writ was filed on behalf of his sister, his only living relative and next of kin." "Did you wake her up for this, Cy?" "Actually, no. It's still much earlier on the West Coast. Commissioner Rodrigo Ruiz, also known as Rodney Kaufman, shrugged in defeat. He had lost. Cy got me out, and Amanda was there waiting for me. Her mother, the judge, had woken up Cy and the judge who signed the writ to secure my release. That was the last time I saw Eloise. There was never a baby. I'm not entirely sure why, but I know her biological clock was ticking, and she preferred his child over mine. I'm convinced that when faced with the choice between a scandal that could harm her lover and having an termination of pregnancy, she opted for the latter. As for his threat to ruin my career, I have no doubt that Commissioner and gubernatorial candidate Rodrigo Ruiz did everything in his power to take me down. But fate intervened. I had a vacation scheduled from September 2nd to 14th, 2008, for a honeymoon that never happened. The day I returned to work, September 15th, Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, sending the financial world into chaos. Eric Erickson became the firm's most influential partner, and I emerged as its top associate. For 6 months, Amanda and I worked 90-hour weeks before we could finally get married. We had to make time because she was pregnant and clearly showing. Amanda hadn't thought about contraception, as she hadn't been with a man for a while before that first weekend we spent together. Our firstborn was a girl, followed by 3 more. But 4 children were enough for us. Amanda became a judge, following in her mother's footsteps, and I now run my own firm. When people ask about the secret to my successful career and marriage, I always say I owe it to a judge's day at the racetrack, 1 broken heart, and a girl known as Sugar.